Well, I should have. Well, I have on the phone. I was going to take this slide, but I think no, in our case, we don't.
Sure. Apparently it's working now. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to June's cabinet meeting. Item 1 is a notice of recording. So to advise the meeting to note that this will be webcast for live and subsequent broadcast by YouTube, and that members of the press and public may record and take photographs, except where there are confidential or exempt items. Before we move on with the agenda, I think we're all aware that today is an important day for the nation of England playing Germany in the Euros. I watched the France-Switzerland game last night, which was a fantastic match, ending, of course, with the excitement, the tension, and the misery of a penalty shootout. Let's hope that England can avoid that this evening. But if people are intending to go out to pubs or bars to watch the game this evening, hopefully the whole city will get behind the England team this evening. But if you are watching it in a bar or restaurant, please do take every care to continue to follow all of the guidance, wearing a mask when you go on your table, ensuring you wash your hands regularly, and maintaining a safe distance from others in order that we can watch the game this evening to ensure that everybody is kept safe and protected from the virus. I did, watching television this morning, see Sir Jeff Hurst has predicted that England will win 2-1. So let's hope that's correct, and come on, England. Let's get us through to the latter stages at least of this tournament. Item 2 is apologies then, and I have apologies from John Cotton and Ian Fagg, Simon Bellman, Price substituting, and Kevin Crompton. I also need to leave at 10 to 12, so hopefully we can get through the agenda before then. But if not, I will obviously pass over to Bridget to chair the number of the meetings. Item 3 is declaration of interest. Does anybody wish to declare interest? No. Item 4 then is exempt information possible exclusion of the person public. We have an exempt appendice in items 6, 7, and 15. Does anybody wish to raise anything on the exempt appendice? Rob.
Thank you. And very much for the other sentiments at the beginning about and therefore we can say. I've got some questions, both to the public but also to the private on item 7 update on transition.
Okay, we will take item 7 at the end of the agenda if we can get there on time. Failing that, I will take it around about 11:30. I'll still be here that discussion takes place. In which we will go into private session in order to consider the exempt appendix in respect of item 7, and we'll return to public session to consider the recommendations and to make any decisions. So can we just formally pass the resolution that's set out on the agenda? Thank you. Item 5 then is the update on COVID-19, and the Director of Public Health, Dr. Justin Harley, is going to give us that update. Justin.
Thank you. So slides have been published to provide an update, so I'll just put out the highlights for Cabinet. We are unfortunately continuing to see case rates in the city rise. We've risen between 30 and 40% over the last week, and that trajectory looks like it will continue. Similar to previous waves, Birmingham is following its own path in that we're taking these steps slowly rather than shooting up as quickly as other cities such as Manchester. And I think that's down to the hard work across the city communities and the support we have for communities to continue testing and to move forward the vaccination programme. We now are in areas of enhanced support because of the increasing rates in the city, and that's focusing on 15 wards where we have the highest case rates, the lowest testing uptake, and the lowest uptake of the vaccination programme. And in those wards, we've been doing additional distribution of lateral flow tests and also trying to target the mobile vaccination capacity that the NHS is leading on to increase vaccination uptake. And we are starting to see signs that that is working, particularly in areas like Allen Rock and the Zells, where we've seen very marked improvements in vaccination coverage over the last 2 weeks, which is very positive. In the most recent 2 weeks, we have seen a sharp increase in cases in the student population. and areas like Bournemouth and Selly Park, Edgbaston have started to spike up. We're seeing a mixture of private student households with clusters of cases and a small number of regional residents affected as well. But predominantly, this is in private student households. It has been, I think, uncovered by universities being very proactive on the testing regime, and particularly having a test-to-play attitude for sports and social events, which have identified a series of cases. With the Delta variant, we know that it spreads very rapidly within households. So once it's in a household, most of the households that are not vaccinated will catch it. We are seeing an increase in pressure in the NHS. That's not surprising. At the moment, we have several 100,000 population that are not vaccinated, and among them, about 25,000 of the at-risk and clinically extremely vulnerable who yet to have their first dose of vaccine. So we're seeing at the moment about 80 to 90 people in hospital across hospitals in the city with COVID. Daily admissions of between 10 and 15 cases, and we have about 20 people in intensive care who have not completed 2 doses of the vaccine. Like any medicine, the vaccine is not perfect, so we will see individuals who have both doses of the vaccine who do get sick, but they're only 90% effective at stopping severe illness and stopping people dying. They are, however, less effective at stopping you catching the virus and passing it on, and that's why it's important that everyone continues to test. And I would just reiterate the leaders both support for England tonight, but also ask that if people are going out to watch the match, please do a lateral flow test before you go. Please avoid passing this virus. Testing is a really important part of the strategy and the approach. And finally, I'll just give a brief update on vaccination, which, as you know, is led by the NHS with the support of the council. As of this morning, we're now up to 61.9% of all over 18s in the city have had their first dose of the vaccine. And actually looking through that, over in the over 50 age group, over 75% of all over 50s in the city have had first dose of vaccine now, which is a really huge achievement of the NHS. And I'm very grateful for members' support in encouraging vaccine uptake, helping the NHS to identify additional vaccination sites, and the support they're providing in community engagement to try and get us to a position where the city is protected against the ongoing challenge of COVID. After taking the questions.
Thanks very much, Justin. You?
Thanks very much, Ian, and thanks, Justin, again for giving us what's probably a lot of really complicated data in a very easy manner that we can all understand. So thanks very much for that. And obviously, I hope that you sort of are able to move around the city without too many difficulties. I think we all saw probably. I'm not quite sure what was happening with Professor Chris Whitty there, but sort of they certainly weren't staying 2 meters away from him. So I hope that you don't have any of those similar experiences. Obviously, there's been a couple of mentions about people celebrating the game tonight. And as I say, I think it's quite a complicated situation. I've read many things in the press. Could you just clarify that, I take it is still safe as long as you stick to the rules and regimes and you go to legal events, that it is still safe to go to our town centres and city centres? Is that still the case? Yes.
Just hold that for a second. Right.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's an important point, Councillor McIntosh, because obviously I know there have been some reports so we don't see hospitality unnecessarily impacted. Just picking up on the vaccination point, Justin, so I think you mentioned 61.9. Obviously, the report highlights that there's what I think 43 wards in the city aren't at the 70% level. What are we doing around potentially looking at actually a change in messaging to need or further work to try and make sure that those, I think, not the inner city wards actually do get to the 70% threshold by the 19th of July? It's clearly we don't want to see there being the issue to hold that up, and we don't want to see residents in those wards not protected. And in terms of the 30 to 40% increase you touched on, is that pattern citywide, or are we seeing fluctuations across the city? I know you highlighted seeing teaching information and rising student areas in the city. And also, have we seen a corresponding rise in hospitalisations and then obviously suffering deaths compared to the case figure? So are we seeing that big growth in the city as well nationally? Just coming back to that student issue, what work's being done at the universities to try and make sure that when people are all sent home, we're not sending the virus out across with them, so we're making sure people are accepted. So if you could just perhaps give an update on what the thoughts are around there. And then the final one is, I think most people will be aware of the issue around this all-university event based quickly. And what further investigations have happened around that? And obviously the
John?
Thank you for all that's been done, Justin. As I understand it, with the Delta variant, it looks like herd immunity is not going to happen with vaccination. Vaccination gives us all individual protection. But people are hoping that they will get protection because everybody else is vaccinated, or they don't take the risk of vaccination, and actually put themselves at huge risk because the virus can spread through the vaccinated population. And therefore, the large numbers of people who are not vaccinated is making very, very great concern. The city, and I hear what you say that outreach is being stepped up. I do wonder whether the council should look at all underspends in public budgets to press more resources into action to target those, not just the district, but those groups, because it's very clear ethnic groups where there's very low rates of vaccination, to target all those groups that are at risk with outreach to persuade them that vaccination is necessary for them individually.
Just on that last point, John, we are doing precisely that, and indeed, Councillor Zaffa has been doing some work to ensure that those who maybe refused the vaccination previously, or those that are in harder to reach communities and might be reluctant to come forward, are given every opportunity to get the jab received.
Thanks, Ian. Can I start by football? England number 7 starts tonight. Between winning and losing. That's all I'll say about Jack Grealish. On the serious issue of vaccination, there has been a real concerted effort in my ward in Wales that's been supported by people right across the community. On this weekend, we have school teachers out in Wales and knocking doors with church leaders, faith leaders, and that's unheard of. School teachers clearly see the importance of tackling this pandemic through vaccination. That's why they're out there. So I want to take this opportunity to run, but it's been a real concerted effort right across the city, particularly on the NHS system to get this right. One of the lessons I think we can learn, particularly on the walking facilities, getting the information earlier than people, so we can communicate in a right way, particularly those communities where you need a diverse range of communication channels to get to those communities. So I'm really pleased that the information is already out there for this weekend, and on those conversations that Cabinet had with Councillor Hamilton yesterday. I know Justin and Councillor Hamilton made some representations to NHS. Let's take this away. So Tuesday morning, 9:51, we've got information on what's happening this weekend in our city in terms of walking. I think that's really, really important. So my message to you is just if we can get this information even earlier than that, on Monday morning, that will help us get the messaging out as quickly as possible to ensure that everybody is vaccinated as soon as possible. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, because the position remains the way to avoid this virus is to come forward and have a vaccination. I just want to pick up the other issue about travel into and out of the city. Of course, because of the prevalence of the Indian or Delta variant, the government placed Birmingham into what it calls enhanced support. Enhanced support comes with extra advice. It is advice, it's not regulation, as with the previous tier system. The extra advice includes that people should minimise their travel into and out of Birmingham. My view is that clearly is impacting, will continue to impact on the hospitality sector of the city's economy, for as long as that advice remains in situ. So we are lobbying and will continue to lobby the government for further support for the hospitality sector here in Birmingham going forward. Justin.
Thank you, and thank you. I think that answer to Councillor question. I think the importance is where people are travelling is use lateral flow before you go and check the area. In terms of the question on case rates rising, we are seeing rise across the city in multiple wards. Just to give you an example, Sutton Wild Green increased by over 200%, although in real terms that's a shift from 7 to 22 cases. So they have a very low baseline. Areas like Bourneville and Pottridge have gone up by just 20%. So it is variable across the city. And we have a very small number of areas, about 4 wards, where we're seeing decrease that is not sustained at the moment. So I think this is a pan city issue, unfortunately. In terms of the student return, part of what we've been doing at the universities is encouraging students to test before they go home, which is exactly why I think we have had this rapid increase. Almost every university city in the country is seeing the same pattern. Students are being responsible and doing additional tests before they go home, and then we're discovering cases. All of the universities have in place emergency accommodation solutions, so that if private landlords take the decision to evict tenants who should be isolating, the universities have support through student welfare in place. The point on messaging is an important one. We have a meeting today with colleagues from the Cabinet Office to go through our engagement and communications approach to see if there's anything else we can do. We have been very good at Birmingham magpieing anyone else's good idea and adapting it and growing it here. And the COVID champions is a good example. We now have 808 COVID champions and 34 youth champions now working in local communities to help get the message out. And as Councillor Zafar alluded to, one of the things we were able to support that doorstep initiative with was the translation of the vaccination toolkit to provide resources, both in easy read but in multiple languages as well, to ensure communities are getting it in multiple routes and multiple ways. And I think now we are facing a group whose questions are getting answered and they are coming forward. And I was talking with the GP yesterday, who talked about a 70-year-old lady who changed her mind and her vaccine. There is no shame, there's no guilt in changing your mind and wanting to have this jab. And there are a cohort that are now going over the line in that space. The increasing access is improving across the city. West Birmingham still remains a challenge, and there should be 7 additional community pharmacy sites opening in the next 2 weeks in West Birmingham to increase access in that site, in that area as well. So there's a lot going on to both change the message, update it, keep it relevant, and respond to the newness and fake news as it comes out. In terms of the cricket event, I understand enforcement colleagues continue to work with the cricket ground to review any learning, particularly ahead of the next match, which I believe is next time. I'm afraid I'm not a cricket fan, but the leader keeps me well briefed on this. So we continue to work with the cricket ground. I think it's fair to say that Edgbaston have done absolutely everything they can to make the site safe. This was not a failure of site safety, it was a failure of conduct and behaviour. And I think perhaps some unfortunate framing of alcohol and cricket, which have to be reviewed by the company in the future. But I think there are lessons learned, and particularly lessons learned about managing the alcohol on the ground for our long days of events, hopefully if the weather is good. In terms of the point of herd immunity, yes, herd immunity does not apply in COVID. COVID keeps changing, and that's why herd immunity is not working. Secondly, natural immunity wears off. And we're now seeing very good evidence of people who had COVID in wave 1 who caught the Delta variant in wave 3. That natural immunity seems to last only about 3 to 6 months maximum. Vaccination immunity seems to be much better and lasts much longer. So we may need a booster, but that will be dependent more on new variants rather than the immunity wearing off. And that's because what we know with variants is that if you have enough antibodies, you can overwhelm a variant, even if that variant looks slightly different. And that's what we're seeing with the Delta variant, because we have people that are vaccinated, the antibodies win, rather than you having to change the vaccine. So that's, I think, what will happen with booster. But yes, herd immunity is definitely out now as a concept for this. And so it is really important people vaccinate, and we are in the process of standing up some more citywide conversations. Councillor Hampton's been working with the NHS to arrange a further briefing with members to bring everyone up to speed on the vaccine programme as well. And finally, on the plan for the walk-in site, we are working with the NHS to get the information to members as soon as we have it. What we try to do is combine that with the Monday afternoon briefing, which combines all of the information both on testing and case rates. And my preference will be to maintain that if we can, as above, so that you have all the information at once. Unfortunately, my team can't turn it around really fast on Monday, But if we do get changes, we try to get that information out to you as quickly as we can, rather than wait for the weekly briefing. So we'll continue to do that and continue to work with the NHS in what is a quite rapidly changing arena in terms of vaccine supply, vaccine workforce, and available science.
Thanks very much, Justin. Just quickly, then.
Yeah, thank you, Felix. I understand you're on a time limit. Just we're talking about vaccines there and longevity of life protection. I think I read there was a report out that was saying that the Pfizer and the Moderna one may give lifetime protection. Is that something that's looking at the benefit?
Yes, it is. And certainly the latest research is suggesting that the vaccines do give long-term protection. As I said, the challenge with variants is that trying to think how to describe it, it's a bit like we've got a key for the lock. And at the moment, if we've got enough keys, we can make the lock work, we can jiggle it and make it fit. If we get a variant where that lock is changed so much, that's where we would need a booster. We wouldn't need to revaccinate everyone from scratch, but we give a booster to slightly tweak the antibody response. But at the moment, the research is showing both the vaccines continue to be safe. There are serious side effects, but they are incredibly rare. They are less common than being killed driving from Birmingham to London, to put that in perspective of risk, and that they give protection for a long time, and that is really promising. We obviously won't know if they protect for 5 years, because this is a new vaccine. But so far, all of the evidence is very promising, that we won't have to revaccinate in this way again, and that boosting may only be needed if we get a very strong variant.
Thanks very much, Justin. We will note that update and just reinforce the message that if you've not had the vaccination, please do come forward and take it. Moving on then to item 6, which is building Birmingham, the Highgate Road development. This report seeks approval for the full business case and procurement strategy for the Highgate Road development, which will deliver 61 new homes for social rent in the city. The business case is attached as Appendix A. The environment still remains difficult for local authorities to deliver social housing. It's clearly the case that the government could be doing more to help us with this particular agenda. The previous report that Cabinet received back in 2019 proposed 30 units on this particular site, but since then an opportunity has been taken to increase the density, and therefore we're now able to deliver 61 units for social rent, and the different house types are set out in paragraph 3.6. But what I particularly wanted to draw attention to is the paragraph 7.1.5, the Birmingham Business Charter for Social Responsibility, which of course is a mandatory requirement for businesses contracting with the council. This is delivering social value outputs that will benefit Sparkbrook and Walsall Woodbourne as well as surrounding areas, and it's particularly impressive. In terms of local employment, that will be targeted at groups, particularly young people. There'll be a donation of £500 for every property built to support the Building Birmingham Scholarship, and a minimum of 11 full-time equivalent employment or apprenticeship opportunities are expected to be delivered out of this development. There's also a proposal to buy locally, so spend as far as practically possible will be with local small and medium enterprises within a 30-mile radius of the scheme, and the tender will include a requirement for tenderers to seek a quotation from Shellports to ensure that they have the opportunity to price for this scheme. Shellports being a business, of course, operated by disabled employees. There will also be a good employer requirement, so a requirement to pay the real living wage down the supply chain, and the development will need to be green and sustainable, and evidence will be required as to how the bidder is ensuring materials used are sourced ethically. So a huge amount there in terms of social value being driven out of this scheme, as well as 61 houses being built for social rent. Any questions or comments, Robert?
Thank you. A couple of points. Firstly, just on the opening cover sheet, it lists the ward affected. But I think that's probably wrong, and I'll come back to why I think that in a minute. Looking at the scheme itself, very much support the comments made by the local councillors around ensuring there's enough parking. The fact that has been picked up, I think that's welcome in this area where that is a big issue. The reason I mentioned about the wards, when you look into the report, it says that there's an overspend in this one, and that money will be recouped by changes savings on the Kings Norton and Meadway schemes. Therefore, it does presumably also affect those wards as well. It doesn't specify what, and that would be my first question, what changes are actually going to be done to those schemes? Are those schemes now going to lose the public open space or community provision that was being provided in them? I think we need to hear that answer so we can understand the issues there. And then when you look at the exempt report for this item, I would ask legal services to really look at this again and actually see whether it really ought to be published. I cannot see a reason why the information on there is exempt. The public report contains what the current proposed cost of this development is. The exempt report simply contains previous estimates of the cost. So it's not the current information. The only purpose for it to be in private is basically to avoid council embarrassment over the mistake. There is no reason that it's exempt information. I really do think we need to look at again and then the information published.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to go on a similar line there, just in one of openness and transparency, just sort of three simple questions, really. What was the original cost that was put against this development? What savings are being made to bring it back in line? And what is the new cost of the development? I think these are questions that the residents have a right to know the answer to. I think any finer bits, there may be something bad, but I think things like that is what openness, transparency is all about.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think the paragraph 731 gives the cost of the development to £12.23 million. But let me pick up the other two issues raised by Councillor Alban. First of all, the exempt appendix. Let me just bring in the city solicitor, Susan Dodd, to comment on whether indeed there was a need for what is contained on the exempt appendix to be exempt.
Mention in there, it's in the criteria that was all over the government, which allows information to be kept private. We will review it again, and if there's anything on reflection that could be published in the public domain, we will, but it does not affect any decision today.
Thank you. And I don't believe there's been any detriment to the development of Kings Norton or indeed the Meadway. These are savings made through the tendering process, I believe, but see Rob James is able to help me out on that. It's not looking like it can. So we'll have to send them out.
Yeah, I mean, so thank you. Because I understand that there's a cost overrun here, so hence why I was trying to find out what was the original cost of the development. You say it's 12.71 million, and then what are the savings that are in between, just so we can see what exactly is developing here.
Okay, so I will get a note on that question. So with that, then, can we agree the recommendations 2.1 through to 2.9 of this report? Thanks very much. That takes us on to item 8, which is the programme team for the Enterprise Zone programme. This report seeks approval to enter into a funding agreement and service level agreements with the Greater Birmingham and Solihull Local Enterprise Partnership in order to extend the delivery period for the Enterprise Zone programme team. That team, of course, is based in the Inclusive Growth Directorate. The intention is to extend the life of the team for an additional 2 years from the 31st of March next year through to the 31st of March 2024. And when you see within this report what is being delivered by this team, you can see the evidence for what I've been saying continually now, that we are entering a golden decade for the city of Birmingham. We're undergoing an unprecedented level of development, which is bringing long-term economic benefits to the area. The key focus, of course, of this growth is in the city centre because of the enterprise zone. HS2, which will be delivered in this next decade, will be the catalyst for growth in the city and the wider region. The extension of the Midland Metro to Digford and potentially through East Birmingham and North Solihull to connect with the HS2 interchange airport with NEC will provide further regeneration opportunities for the city. And this level of activity represents one of the largest infrastructure investment programmes in the entirety of the country. So the team resource needs to be assured to meet the demand of delivery and providing effective programme and performance management. And then beyond that, the EZ and Curzon Programme Investment Plan identifies £1 billion of infrastructure investment that will cover over 39 designated sites with significant growth potential to deliver 71,000 jobs in 1.1 million square metres of new commercial floor space, which will contribute some £2.3 billion per year to the economy and has the potential to generate in excess of £2 billion a year in additional business rates, which will be reinvested across the area. And if you add on to that the work that the team is also supporting on Birmingham Smithfield, that will transform the city's visitor economy, creating a major cultural and leisure destination, a dynamic mix of uses that will include vibrant markets, leisure and cultural facilities, a major public square and an exemplar residential neighbourhood. The Paradise Scheme, which across 3 phases will deliver another 140,000 square metres of Grade A commercial floor space, 300 private sector rented residential units, 2 new car parks, a 4-star hotel with 250 rooms and a sky bar. The Grade 1 listed Old Curzon Station, refurbished by HS2, £2 million of EZ funding going into that, along with 3.6 million of HS2 funding to bring that important historic building back into use as offices and exhibition space. Digbeth High Street Public Rail Scheme, which is driving regeneration on both sides of Digbeth High Street. The South Side Public Rail provides safe and attractive route for cyclists and pedestrians heading from New Street Station to the South Side Quarter. The Belmont Works Scheme, which has been invested in by Birmingham City University and will be the base for Steam House in the future. Very pleased that we've managed to save the facade of those works for future generations to enjoy. Moore Street Queensway Public Realm Development, where we're providing world-class public realm enhancements that will fundamentally change the character of Moore Street Queensway, creating a major new gateway for visitors arriving into Birmingham's new Curzon HS2 station. So genuinely a golden decade for the future ahead, and we can be confident that Birmingham and its people have a bright future ahead of us. And we need to ensure that the majority of those jobs created and homes built are provided for the people of this city. I'm happy to take any questions or comments. Okay, if there's nothing on that major success story for the city, can we then agree the recommendations 2.1 through to 2.4? Thank you. That takes us to item 9, which is the Birmingham Development Plan Review and Revised Local Development Scheme. In line with the legislation, a review of the local plan, which includes the Birmingham Development Plan, has been undertaken in order to assess if an update of the plan is required. That review indicated that the Birmingham Development Plan does require updating, and that's because of numerous significant changes to national planning policy and legislation, as well as changes in local circumstances and priorities. The development plan, of course, was adopted back in 2017, forms a key part of Birmingham's local plan, a collection of documents that sets out the planning framework for the city. As I said earlier, local planning authorities are required by legislation to review their plan, and they have to review it at least every 5 years from the date of adoption. Paragraph 3.3 sets out what the review has considered in Birmingham's case. Findings of that review are attached at Appendix 1. There have, of course, been a number of changes to national planning policy and guidance since our development plans were adopted. Not least, the standard method for calculating housing need was introduced by the government in 2017 and revised in December of 2020. That new standard method places a 35% uplift on the housing numbers on the top 20 largest English cities. Of course, increases Birmingham housing numbers considerably when compared to the assessed need, which sits within the Birmingham Development Plan. The BDP figure will remain as the city's housing requirement until the BDP is 5 years old, and that will be arrived at in January of next year. After that point, the local housing need calculated using the standard method will be used to determine the housing requirement. Therefore, it is important that work on updating our plan commences so that the housing number generated by the new standard method can be properly considered and planned for. I do think that the government's housing policy is in somewhat of a mess in this country. These changes that have been resisted by some backbench members of the Conservative Party because it fears further greenbelt development have forced already a number of changes by the government, but imposing a 35% uplift on the 20 largest English cities really is an ill-informed approach to how we might meet our housing need going forward. Of course, there are other factors outside of what the government is doing that are taking place that require us to update the plan, not least the fact that the Council have declared a climate emergency back in 2019, and we have committed to achieving carbon neutral status by 2030 or as soon after as a just transition will allow. So the new plan will play an important role in supporting the move towards net zero carbon. There are also the long-term consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic that will impact on retail and office floor space targets currently set out in the BDP. And of course, the big city plan is now being replaced by our future city plan. And this will require the spatial strategy of the BDP to reevaluate city centre growth areas. So given the scale of all of these changes, both to national policy and changes in local circumstances, this report recommends that the new local plan is prepared to replace the current development plan. And we'll be taking this forward with the setting up a new cross-party small board that will oversee the changes that come forward. John.
Thank you. And I can see the case for doing some more work on this. I just wanted to ask about the timing of it, because I think in your introductory remarks you indicated some of the uncertainties. There's two big uncertainties around planning at the moment. One is what happens to office use in the light of the pandemic and changes in working patterns. And secondly, of course, the government proposed policies on planning, which are proved so unpopular with Conservative shires. And I'm sure Cabinet and Liberal Democrats will continue taking safe Conservative seats, particularly if they pursue these planning policies, which take away powers from local councils to regulate planning. So I just question the time. I know it takes a long time to develop a local government plan, but the working group in the office is starting off with quite a lot of uncertainty at the moment in terms of the set around office, particularly around office use, around government policy. And there might be a sense of marking time for a few months until there's clarification around some of these issues.
Ron?
Thank you. I think it's clear that this work is going to happen from the council. We need to be going into it, making sure that we very much firmly have a commitment to brownfield first in the city. We shouldn't be just surrendering green space on the basis of some hypothetical numbers. I think it's also important that we actually, as a council, push back on the numbers and push back on the existing numbers we have. Because when you look at what happened just down the road in Coventry, actually those numbers have been quite wrongly calculated and were vastly overestimating the need there was. So do you think that piece of work needs to happen as part of it? Also, I mean, I've raised this before, council previously had said go away and look at it, it's never really come back, so I raise it again. We also need to be looking at when the council is disposing of either land or when it's building new stock, like just heard an earlier item, really does need to look at the use of covenants so that we can make sure that the houses that are built, family housing that's built, actually can then remain as family housing, not get bought up by developers and converted into other forms of housing, because that's what there's a shortage of in the system. We need to make sure, therefore, when we are building houses, they actually are then what they're meant to have been built for. And then finally, on the affordability issue, and that really touched on it, so I'm sure we picked up as part of the work that's done in it. We need to again do more in the city around making sure that some of the homes are affordable for people to buy. Because you look at all the surveys, it's not just people don't want to rent the rest of their life, they want to be able to get on the housing market. So we need to make sure that we're making it affordable for people that can have money. There's many types of schemes across the country that councils are trying innovative things. And we ought to look at some of that as well.
Thank you. I'm going to bring in the officer to comment on some of these issues, but I just want to make a few comments myself. First of all, this notion of brownfield first. The Birmingham Development Plan forward and adopted in 2017 proposes building on all available brownfield sites. The reason you can't go down this idea that we build on brownfield before we build on any greenbelt units is the need to maintain a 5-year land supply for housing developments. That is in the legislation. Can't get around that. And if we do not include the released greenbelt site, we do not have a 5-year land supply. If you do not have a 5-year land supply, then you are susceptible to developers proposing development on the greenbelt that they can then win on appeal because you've not maintained a 5-year land supply. But I come back to where I started off. The development plan already proposes building on all available brownfield sites. That gets us so far, this is 50,000 units. Assessed need in the plan currently is for 89,000 units. I agree with the comments around affordability and the comments about the government's figures. So the government's figures, I think, are plucked out of thin air and made up on the hoof. And you are quite right, we should push back on those numbers. On affordability, yes, more can be done, but that requires both the government to do more and indeed the mayor to do more. Indeed, we have a meeting with one of the mayor's officials coming up to press this particular point. The mayor is simply not doing enough to help the delivery of affordable units in the city of Birmingham. I will bring you back, Molly, but I'm going to bring you the officer to make some comments first.
Thank you. In terms of the uncertainties that the have made in the plan, whilst we are in this position where we do have a lot of uncertainty around plans and what the future might hold, and the government are quite clear that shouldn't be a reason to delay plan making. But what we are doing is taking a flexible and pragmatic approach, so we will be in a position to respond to those changes and to do what we need to do to meet the requirements of the new planning system, should that be put in place before we go to examination. We also fully expect that the government will introduce transitionary measures with any changes to the planning system. So we may be putting the plan through into transitionary measures. It just depends on the timing of the government and how it takes to enact that bill. In terms of brownfield first, just to add to the points that have already been made, we will undertake all sites and we will be emphasising the importance of brownfield sites and that site search. And we've also undertaken some work to do our own sites to see where we think there might be opportunities around brownfield land in particular. In terms of the affordability of that, in terms of home ownership, the government have introduced first homes, and we will start to need to give those through our development management system, and we need to consider them in the plan.
Thank you. Just in terms of obviously density, there are things that can be done around density, like building townhouse style, for instance, like used to be done 100 years ago to fit more houses onto a site than would otherwise be able to done. But Ian, I just wanted to push back on that point you made around protecting the greenbelt, because you helpfully pivoted from protecting green spaces to protecting the greenbelt and gave a very well rehearsed answer about how it's a 5-year housing supply master problem. The issue is when the council took forward building on Burford Road and Shortleaf Road playing fields, and it was pointed out that they were not on the 5-year housing plan, so there was absolutely no need to build on those green spaces in the middle of very densely built urban areas. You yourself were about called in and said it doesn't matter that it's not on the 5-year plan, it can still be built on, and you were perfectly happy to build on those green spaces. So that's why I say the council needs to have a strict brownfield site first policy. Because at the moment, its policy is to build on green spaces in this city.
So just to pick up those 2 points then, density is a valid point. We had a report earlier on Highgate development site where we've increased the density on that site in order to deliver not 30 social housing units for people in the city, but 61. So we are pushing density indeed throughout the time developing the BDP, and since we've continued to push on density to help meet some of our need. There is a need to look for further sites across the city. And some of those sites are indeed no longer used for school playing field sites. And the reason for that is quite straightforward. We can only meet so much of our need within the city boundary. Some 57,000 units, I think, can be delivered within the city boundary against our assessed need of 98,000. If we do not continue to push for further sites, we will simply increase the level of homelessness and the level of overcrowding in the city. That is not fair on the people of Birmingham, and we, the Labour administration, will do all we can to meet the housing need of the people who live in this city. Okay, if there's no further comments, can we agree then recommendations 2.1 through to 2.4? Agreed? Thank you. Item 10, dates of meetings and appointments of other bodies, including outside bodies, to be made by the Cabinet. The proposed meeting dates for Cabinet set out in this report, and then I assume all of the names have been submitted from the three parties. Are any amendments? Right.
Thank you. It wasn't an amendment, it's actually just a request to ask to consider, something might just take away from it. That's on page 193, number 28. Castle Bromwich Hall Gardens Trust has now asked for a second councillor to go on, and obviously that's a facility not cited in Birmingham, well used by residents in East Birmingham, but also residents in North Birmingham. So I've asked that the company consider the second, the new appointed person this year.
And well, we've already made the new nomination in our submission, but I will take that away and bear it in mind for 12 months' time. Okay, can we agree then, recommend the recommendations for this report 2.1 through to 2.5? Agreed? Okay, I'm not proposing there's any need to take a comfort break unless anybody's desperate to do so. I think we should press on. Item 11 is the financial outturn report, and this is again exceptionally good news for the City of Birmingham, because the financial outturn report is flagging a balanced position, and that is balanced after transferring £17.5 million of COVID grant to a COVID reserve and transferring further underspend just over 78 million into reserves. The COVID reserve, of course, is about meeting the already emerging financial pressures and risks from the pandemic. We're not yet out of that situation, and those risks will be ongoing throughout this financial year. And then paragraph 412 sets out money allocated into reserves for specific purposes. And I just wanted to flag up three of those. The £12.1 million that's placed into reserves to now help clean the city up. We've seen during the period of the pandemic a real outbreak of fly tipping right across the city. It's not just in Birmingham. People have been dumping rubbish up and down the country. We are going to use this resource working with communities across the city to clean the city of Birmingham. This is our city. We all have a responsibility to keep it clean and tidy, and we will be taking a zero tolerance approach to those who have dumped rubbish in the city. If we catch them, we'll put them in front of the courts. Secondly, the £10 million that's been placed into the Community Recovery Plan Reserve that provides us with the resource to help with the recovery from the effects of the COVID pandemic. And then finally, the £2 million that's been set aside into an SEND reserve. Recently had a visit from Ofsted, and we'll be considering the recommendations of Ofsted in due course. We've set aside this money to invest in SEND improvement and in order to respond to the remarks that Ofsted will be making. So I think we're placing this money into reserves whereby we can maximise the impact and benefit to communities and citizens across Birmingham. Let me now bring in the person who's been responsible alongside Treasury officials in the Council in producing this balanced position. And I do congratulate the officers in finance for the work that they've been doing alongside Councillor Tristan Chapman.
Thank you, Leader. Obviously, it's been an extraordinary year as a result of the COVID pandemic, but actually, it's also been an extraordinary year in terms of the improvement we've seen in the financial position of the council. There's more on that in the next report as well, but I can just think of a few things. I think the remarkable turnaround we've seen in the city authority over the last couple of years in terms of managing both the revenue and capital budgets has been exceptional, and that is, as Lee has already said, an absolute credit to both its finance service staff, but also members of staff across the council and budget holders and, of course, executive members of the council as well. We've worked tirelessly over the last year, but before that as well, to ensure our financial position is stable and improving. There's just a couple of things I'll point out in terms of the report itself, in terms of the way we treated the redeployment of staff towards COVID work, and that totals some 48 million, which members I'm sure have noted. But the reason we've done that is to be absolutely clear on the demarcation between business as usual, COVID costs, and then furthermore, transformation costs as well. And all of that will be continued to be reported through the monthly exception reports that go to scrutiny and the quarterly reports that come here to cabinet. So again, in terms of the improvement the way we manage our financial position, the absolute transparency and clarity over what money is being spent where and for what purpose. I hope it's something members across the board noted. I hope it's something that scrutiny much appreciated. The final point I'll just make quickly is around our reserves position as well. Also, members will, I'm sure, noted improved reserves position, and as well as those individual earmarked reserves that leaders already pointed out, general improvement in the reserves position matches or has been put in place to match our risk profile. Because obviously, as a big and ambitious local authority, we take on big and ambitious projects, and therefore it's right that our level of reserves matches that ambition, just to make sure we don't find ourselves in the sort of financial position that some other local authorities, I won't feel the need to name, have found themselves in recent months and years. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I have some comments and questions. Starting with you.
Thanks very much, Ian. Just on Treasury Management Annex 3.1, I noticed there that we borrowed £10 million from Barking and Dagenham in April 2020 at a rate of 1.7%, which is repayable in April 21 this year. But in January this year, we lent Barking and Dagenham £5 million at a rate of just 0.02% for 1 month. Now, could we not have just said to them, if you need that money now, can we not just repay you early and save the interest? Because, if you look at those two in tandem, I understand that, there is sort of the same way this interbank lending goes on as inter-council lending goes on between the two, and it's all a cash flow issue. But you would have thought that one column would have netted off the other, and especially seeing the differences in the exchange rate, 1.7%, what we're paying them, and then in return for short-term loans, as we all know, normally carry an excessive, sometimes eye-watering one, but we're only charging 0.2%. I was just wondering a bit of an explanation around that, and ultimately, who signed that off?
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, and first of all, thank you to the officers for the work they've been doing this year in difficult circumstances on the books, and obviously also all the COVID ones we've got to help. When you look at the table on 2.29, table 4 on page 249 of the pack, 11 of the report, normally it's the savings table. Normally that table would contain which of the savings were achieved on a one-off basis. Now, when you go further into the report on page 282 of the pack or page 44, there is a table that seems to pick up some one-off ones. What I just wanted some clarity and confirmation is, are those ones which are mentioned on page 44 of the report the only one-off savings, because there's no table on here? Or if there is some other ones which were achieved one-off, can we get an updated table circulating around which ones were one-off and what the basis of one-off is on it? Just picking up on the street scene, the leader was quite right to highlight the growing amount of lighted waste and rubbish on our streets. I also think it's right to thank all those residents across the city who do volunteer litter picking and cleaning up of lighted waste. It's quite remarkable how many residents, particularly over the last year, have come out and done that. We've got wonderful buses in my own area, making a great difference to the city and trying to fight the tide of all this rubbish that's on the streets. But when you look in the report, it says there's an 8.7 million overspend on the street scene that's been put down to COVID. There isn't really any further detail on that. So I wonder if the cabinet member could just explain why it's COVID related, because obviously that department is quite often overspent. And even though I know there was some rebasing of the budget, it wouldn't be the first time in the last 9 years that the budget has been rebased and still been overspent afterwards. So can we just get some information specifically why it's COVID related, rather than what has happened in that department in the past, if it's just creeping up? Then when you turn to Annex A7 and Part 2, it says there's a 0.5% pressure in waste. And the report, it was the bad debt provision following reduced collection, following the suspension of auto issuing of reminders. Why did we suspend the automatic issuing of reminders for bills? If it was automatic, we didn't need to do anything to actually have them go out and collect the money. And if they did need to have something done, well, one, they weren't automatic, but two, that we weren't perhaps correctly applying the government's guidance around COVID. Of if something has to be done from the office, then you can go in and do it. Turning further on to the report onto Annex A9, it talks about contingencies, and there's an underspend on the contingency drawdown on car parking, 252,000. Can you just explain what that is? So is that a case of actually more people were using the car parks over the last year than we expected, or is that a benefit of the income reclaiming scheme that was from the government? On that. And then just touching on Annex 3.1 that Councillor Mackey's already touched. We've got in here that the council borrowed 10 million from Parking Dagenham in April 2020. That's going to cost us, if my maths is right, 170,000 in interest. And then we've loaned them 5 million. But it's going to cost Parking or give us in income simply £1,000. So we are paying them 1,700 times more interest than they will be paying us. Or if you want to look at it on a monthly basis, 71 times more a month than we will see. I do think there are some answers around that need to be answered.
Yeah, it's all to do with the type of loan and the time of it, but we'll get an explanation. John Hunt.
Thank you. In the budget debate in February 2020, Leader, in your summing up, you made the following comments. Let me give you the undertaking I think you were looking for. You would not, over the next 12 months, be raiding the adult social care budget for other purposes. And that was about the issue of underspending adult services and both the public perception when they're paying specific council tax levies, but also the pressures on social care and the difficulties of providing the necessary standard of service. And the fact that there's been repeated underspend which have been employed for other purposes of social care. Now, what's happened this year is the reporting number of only £7 million in social care. That underspend is going back again into general reserves, not being put back into social services. In spite of that undertaking that was given in February 2020. I noted that no such undertaking was given in this year's budget debate, in spite of several of us raising the same issues. But the fact is that council levies the special social care reserves, and to my mind, it should continue to guarantee that that money is spent on social care, particularly given the pressures of that sector. In general, in terms of the sum spent, it's been very welcome. There's clearly been improved financial management in the council, but I think possibly the cabinet member takes a little bit too much credit when also the effect of the pandemic and the way money has been employed during the pandemic has been that public sector budgets have tended to underspend in mainstream budgets in the last year. I think if any of the opposition parties have come to the budget debate in February and said there will be a £70 million underspend and this is how we propose to spend it, we would have been laughed out of court. However, I would refer you to our amendment in the budget debate because we placed a lot of emphasis on one-off spending, which is what we have here. We have a £70 million windfall. And when you have a windfall of that kind, you know you cannot use it to increase general revenue budgets. You have to find sensible ways of using it to hopefully reduce future costs and tackle immediate issues. I welcome the extra money going into the fly tipping budget, and I think you're right, there's been an increase during the pandemic, but there's also a significant problem with fly tipping prior to the pandemic. And so far as I've seen so far, the plans that have been set out by the cabinet member in advance of this cabinet meeting, 2 weeks in advance, I noticed, and before the papers were even tabled, that I noted from those plans that there's still no suggestion of any flexibility around the fly-tipping dumping that takes place on private and shared land, which has been a huge problem in the last 12 months when people have been cleaning out, and they've dumped on land that they share with their neighbours, access land, etc., blocking access drives, and increasing other problems in communities by doing so. And again, I note there's no funding for that. My broad point about using the underspend, however, and I didn't see it in the flight of fitting plans, is to search for one-off projects that can make a sustained difference. What we proposed in the budget debate was devolving quite a lot of money to communities, and there's significantly more money here than was available during the budget debate. Devolving it to communities who may find solutions which are unique to their communities for local problems, often around restricting access to sites that have been abused by fly-tippers, as well as I think there is investment in cameras, which I think is important and would be very useful if we see cameras becoming more available for local fly-tipping sites, but maybe the local communities can do a better job than the council centrally at identifying the sites that are risk. I think there's been a problem for some years, even before budgets and enforcement were cut, in terms of identifying and recognising what local problems were around fly-tipping. There's been a big emphasis on just having this important prosecution, that's been good. But I think some of the problems in communities haven't been recognised or acknowledged by the system. I'm not sure the plans that have been brought forward are going to deal with that very effectively. So beyond that, I'm disappointed that there's been not more emphasis on looking for one-off projects, particularly around Route to Zero, that might be implemented with the reform that's become available. Mostly going into reserves, which were already quite well stacked. I know there are challenges in the future. At the end of the day, those challenges are not going to be resolved by using reserves. They can be resolved by reshaping the council, as we know. So looking for those one-off projects that help with that reshaping seems to me something we should be doing more of. Thank you.
Thank you. There is indeed a reserve to do precisely what you just said, as it happens with Michelle. I'm going to bring in John O'Shea in a second to talk about what we're doing clearly at the city, commenting extensively on that. But I just wanted to pick up first of all the point about adult social care. Let me make it absolutely clear there is no grading of the adult social care budget. As I pointed out in the budget debate back in February, and indeed as was set out in the budget report, we are investing more into adult social care and indeed children's social care than the precept and the additional government grant would on the surface allow us to do. We're investing way beyond that sum of money. The actual numbers are scattered at the moment, but it was substantially above the total of the precept and the additional government grant. So there's no raid on adult social care. There's in fact this city council investing into adult social care. Let me bring in John O'Shea on the
Thank you, Leader. And I should point out, of course, England are already in action today because we're the one-way national. We off about 10 minutes ago. So maybe that seemed you well. Sadly, I'm here rather than watching that. I do need to praise Councillor Chatfield and the officer team for delivering such a fantastic turnaround in our resources. We've had a decade of austerity that has hurt this council badly and has restricted the ability to deliver what the people of the city want. And we know they want cleaner, greener streets, and we're going to do that. We will do that through effective use of that money to tackle the issues that we can pick up. Councillor mentioned about tackling bonds on fly tipping on private land. We have no duty to clear private land as City Council. Our powers are extremely restricted on that. It is a fairly bottomless pit. We'll start picking up that as well. We have a lot of work to do on our streets, and we acknowledge that, and we're going to put the resources in that. But there also has to be a responsibility of private landowners to keep their land clean and tidy. The public purse is not able to pick up all the costs from bad landlords and bad owners who can't be bothered to do it. With regard to COVID costs, Councillor, we've had a delay in implementing our restructuring plan within the Directorate. We suffered losses of income on trade waste and other parts of the service.
and additional costs related to biosecurity, which has increased our costs across this year. But again, we're looking forward to a really positive 12 months ahead. We're tackling the issues that matter to people of the city. And I certainly hope that we get support from our opposition members on this, not just on helping out on this opinion, but actually supporting us in delivering this. There are other people who are fly tipping the city, and I've got those criminals, and we're going to get more than prosecuted and more than punished. And like Councillor Rawley, I do praise the thousands of people who are out there helping to keep our neighbourhoods clean and tidy. We have so far, in the past few weeks, issued more than 5,000 pieces of equipment to people. And we are having individual bags, but they're out there in use, literally within hours of being issued by our department. And people in the city are stepping up to help keep their neighbourhoods tidy. And I praise that. And again, that leader, and to Jackie for their work and getting us money to do this.
Thank you. Go on then, John.
If I may, I think the current member said something that wasn't quite correct. You may not realise that. He said the powers of dealing with private land are restricted. Well, they're different. Actually, the council has very sweeping powers and can apply when there's flights being on private land. And they can do it at low cost as well. This is able to conduct a clean-up on private land and then to charge the landowners for that work and to recoup the costs of doing so. The council has not deployed any resources to do that in recent years, but it could do so, as I say, and could recoup quite a lot of those costs. And certainly it could persuade people who are doing it, they might not want to do it if they're going to face the charges, that they would do so.
So I should be words you duty or powers. On that. Yes, we do have power to take action and clear land and impose a charge on that land. Whether we have a prospect of recovering that money from the landowner is entirely different. So we go over the whole number of bad debts.
Thank you. Paula.
Leader, can I just add that Birmingham City Council is doing a lot of work in this area? I have just on board on Friday. I've been working with Robert James and many of the team to do some joined up work, but not just Birmingham City Council working on its own, with the fire service, with other agencies, to try and get these spots of land cleared up. So what we've been doing is looking at how we can develop a policy of some kind that Birmingham City Council doesn't necessarily take the lead, but we work with partners to get these bits of land cleared up, because wards like mine are littered with these lands. And if people understand, and I know John does, it's called horizontal health and safety issues. So basically, if you've got an elderly person in their own home and they're stuck in their own home and the garden is full of rubbish in the alleyway, then there is a duty there to clear it up so these people can get out. So at the moment, just to thank John and his team, because they are doing a lot of work in the background to ensure that we do clean up this land. So I hear what John's saying, but I know that they are working really hard to work with other services to clean up some of this land. And we'll start to see more and more of this as the months go on.
Thanks, Paul. As I said a little earlier, this is our city and we all have a responsibility to keep it clean and tidy, whether that's residents or businesses. We all have a part to play. Okay, I'm going to bring Tristan back now to pick up the other matters that were raised on the outturn report. Tristan.
Thank you, Leader. Just firstly on the Council Organs points, we're absolutely providing analysis and looking forward to the savings. They will be, most will be recurrent, and some will represent a permanent budget reduction and others will increase the income. We'll get that. He's not listening, are you?
I'm listening, Joe.
Are you listening? Fantastic. That's fine. You missed a very important answer. Okay, so in terms of, I think Councillor Shea covered off quite nicely the issues around the neighbourhood budget and the impact of COVID on those. Obviously, all parts of the council have been impacted by COVID, if by nothing else, simply by redeployment of large volumes of staff across the organisation. And that obviously has knock-on effects on all other parts of the organisation as well. And in terms of the adults question, I think Leader made a point that whether it is about we put an extraordinarily large amount to adults, far more than the precepts allow us to. but also it's about managing known demographic pressures that are coming down the line. We know those pressures will be emerging, and they are still emerging. But you can't predict in any given, we're dealing with people, you can't in any given year predict exactly how many are coming from the system, even if you can estimate and work around that. But in the end, those numbers are always subject to a little bit of flux, and so it's right that we treat that cautiously. And of course, the transformation funding in adults has been significant as well. And the final one I think we've got is just on the question about the car parking contingency. That is essentially a contingency simply to allow us where we make car park closures on lots of car parking spaces. It's necessary, sensible thing to do is keep contingency in place as a precaution where we know due to construction changes or due to income, redevelopment, regeneration, there will be car parking spaces lost, and therefore it's appropriate we have contingency for that. And then finally, in terms of capital, in terms of treasury management, I will bring in Becky if I can on that point. I'll just make a point. Is the graph contained within the report does illustrate how the PWLB rate is ticking up, and therefore the likelihood is in order to secure best rates, it would be necessary for us to enter into more arrangements with other local authorities or other lenders and borrowers in order to make sure we get best value for the taxpayer. And I have full confidence that our treasury management team know what they're doing. It is a complex world. We can, of course, get a briefing. I think members of the staff we've had in the past, and members I think we have attended to go detail of that is an art and science. But in the end, I am confident that they work extremely hard to do the best value. But I will bring in Becky just on the technicals of that.
Yeah, just to respond to that one, they're two very different transactions. One's a 2-year fixed term borrowing with penalties should we want to repay early. The other was a very, very short term cash investment where we had excess cash, and that at least buys us some return rather better than just leaving it in the bank for that short term. So that there are two different transactions that we would be able to net off without paying penalty.
There you go, complicated game treasury management. That's left to the experts. In which case then, the ACTA report, as I said earlier, which is a balanced position, which is
It was just a little bit about who signed that.
Oh, apologies, yes. So that's done down through a sub-delegation from myself to the Treasury team, and the lead in that Treasury team, who signed the multi-store report of that team.
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, the ACTA report then, as has been reported earlier, is a breaking position, so credit to Tristan and the team in finance. Can we agree recommendations 2.1 through to 2.6? Agree. Item 12 is follows on nicely actually, and it's further good news for the finance team here at Birmingham City Council. It's the outcome of SIPA's assessment of the council's financial management capability. Tristan.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, again, welcome piece of good news, I think, and actually you're absolutely right. The two tie together very nicely. It's not coincidence that the outcome report and the revenue management has improved so much within this organisation. And the sixth report, which has taken us from a 1-star to a 3-star, is indicative of that improvement. I'll just stress at this point, this is a collaborative endeavour. It is led by Service Finance, but it has involved improvement across the entire organisation, every part of the organisation. So I really just like to place a record of my thanks to all the budget holders who've also engaged with the SIPA process, not least members in this room who contributed to the review very ably and part of the credit, credit for the improvement we've seen does sit into the about between two, sound two this, but members around this room who contributed strongly to improving budget management within their own directorates as well. We had hoped to reach 3 stars next year, so actually this is not only a vast improvement on our position, it is also a very speedy improvement on our position. We are coming a year early as well, which again just shows the speed and dedication the sheer work that officers have put in. And just on a positive note as well, our progress has also been recognised nationally as well. We have been nominated to prestigious national awards and public finance awards to take place in September. One of them an individual award, and I won't embarrass the officer in the room, but she sat to my left, but also to the team as well, who've done an extraordinary piece of work in delivering this improvement. And I hope very much, fingers crossed, that we'll be successful in securing those awards. But of course, there is still room for improvements. We are 3 stars and not 5 stars, and still some way to go should we choose to go down that route. and officers are working to determine what the next steps will be in terms of our improvement journey. But we are continuing to implement target operating model, and of course, absolutely crucially, the new Oracle ERP system as well, the implementation of which is well underway, which is a crucial part of underpinning our financial services across the organisation.
Thanks very much, Kristen. I think we have a comment from you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Ian. So hopefully won't burst everyone's bubble here, but 3 years in a row, 2017, 2018, 2019, Birmingham City Council received Section 24 notice in each and one of those years. So Birmingham City Council is the first council in history to ever be to get 3 statutory notices for financial mismanagement. So here, the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy, CIPFA, graded BCC against a 5-star model, as Councillor Chatsfield said, and they've awarded us 3 stars, which they rated as moderate. So I can hear the excitement of everyone's been graded moderate, and when you're going from 1 star to 3, that probably is a lot of work to go from financial mismanagement to acceptable, but this really is not where the taxpayers of this city really want us to be. I think they're really looking for us to be up at 5 stars, and I think there's a lot of congratulations going to Becky, and probably deservedly. But I must point out we've got an interim CEO, we've got an interim CFO, and so how sustainable is this improvement from 1 star to 3? Talk of going to 5, but holding it at 3 here could be quite difficult. And the other thing as well that crossed my mind when I read the report was CIPCA. They say they've given us 3 stars. Rob Whiteman, who's the CIPCA CEO, he was a non-executive advisor to the Labour administration during a period when they were deemed to need outside help to run the council. And so basically, do we have someone here almost marking his own homework? The CIPCA gave advice to this council about financial resilience, and here CIPCA are coming in and looking at our financial resilience and have given us 3 stars. So I would feel more comfortable if the LGA or someone like that had come in and given us a full audit rather than that. But at the end of the day, we've moved from 1 star to 3 stars. We're now officially moderate, and I would say that I would welcome the improvement there, as I'm sure everyone in the city does.
I'm not surprised that you're very, very disappointed about this, Ewan, but I'm not so sure it's sensible to be questioning the intent of Mr. Whiteman in this matter at all.
Thank you. And just on that, I think what Councillor Mackey was saying was merely that it wasn't a surprise we'd improved when we got the person who knows what needs to happen changed, whether that's actually sustainable long term. I wanted to first of all thank staff for the work they've done on this. A huge amount of effort to be done over the last years to turn around where finances in the city have got to, and the staff deserve a huge amount of credit for that, and obviously good luck to those unknown doctors that Councillor Chaplin referenced earlier, may or may not be up on the wall shortly. I also wanted to just touch on the fact that while it is very welcome this happened, it is an interesting difference the council has taken to how they've treated the openness and transparency of this report, with the one that gave them 1 star. And I do believe still hasn't actually been published to the public. It would have been interesting for this cabinet report agenda to actually have contained 1 star and the 3-star report, so people could compare and actually have a look at the differences. So perhaps that's something that could go away, and all members could actually be emailed a publishable copy of 1 star report, which was previously done and hidden away from members. I'm sure it had nothing to do with the fact that that was deeming the council was inadequate. And this one merely says it's moderately acceptable. No doubt that will probably change. But it will highlight the one other thing in here that really is raises a concern still, which we've been raising for years in the council, and that's procurement. And the council really does need that. And indeed, that's a particularly poignant point because of the issues we're going to see on the report later around the potential procurement issues yet again. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you've done your best there to put some cold water on what is clearly a significant achievement in the city council. Kristen.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I'll just point out that we have moved into the top quartile nationally, local authorities. There is, as far as I'm aware, no 5-star local authorities. So to achieve 4-star will put us at the very top of the national picture. And I would also say that, yes, Councillor Mackey, we are aware of the comments made in the audit report. So to point out that last year's, there was no section 24 last year. I think, again, it's indicative of the improvement in this organisation, of how much progress we have made in what is a relatively short period of time. And I would echo Leader's comments. The support we've had for SIPFA has been invaluable. They are the experts in this area, but I don't think that in any way undermines the achievement in terms of progress we have made. It has been broadly recognised. And the final comment I'll make again is just really that there is, no one is denying that there is still room for improvement, and we'll continue to do that. Procurement is a service that is undergoing significant change in the organisation. We have a new operating model coming. We have a project manager in place to deliver that, and we also have a new AD who will continue shortly as well. So we are making substantial progress in that regard, and I don't accept the characterisation of the view. Of procurement we have made, it is sitting in flux, but there is a vast number of procurements that are successfully completed to everyone's satisfaction in the organisation to deliver what they are required to deliver. So on that, I think I'll leave there.
Thank you very much, Kristen. Can we agree with their recommendations 2.1 and 2.2? Thank you. Test item 13, which is the Rough Sleeping Initiative, year 4, that's 2021-22 funding bid approval and grant awards. Unfortunately, Councillor Sharon Thompson is not with us for this meeting, so I'm going to ask Rob James to just address this report. Rob.
Thank you, Lou. And as you say, this is the 4th year that we've been able to submit a bid for the Rough Sleeping Initiative. It was first launched in 2018, and this year's bid is for just over £1.2 million, as detailed in the report. Significant progress has been made over the last 12 months or so during the pandemic, in bringing rough sleepers off the streets and providing both accommodation and support to rough sleepers. This has been recognised by government through their campaign of Everyone In. The success of those initiatives over the last 12 months has been largely down to Steve Philpott, our strategic lead for rough sleeping. And Steve will go through the details of our submission, which amounts to the £1.2 million. Thank you, Lina.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm pleased to say that we've had a result from MHCLG in terms of the revenue, which is 1.238782 million. So very nearly all that we asked for. In addition to that, we've had funds brought forwards into Q1 from last year from MHCLG and the transition payment. So in total, we're about 1.6 million for the rough sleeper work in this year, which is double what we had for the previous year. So that does underline the hard work that's gone on. And I would very much point to the partners, the voluntary sector and statutory partners in this that have made that possible. And some of the learning that we had from the pandemic, we're going to take forwards into the commissioning for this year that we've just gone into. So we have more emergency accommodation available. We have more navigators available on the streets to help people. We have a dedicated social worker post. We have a night shift outreach out there every night on the streets of Birmingham. We have a tenancy rescue service for tenancies that are collapsing around the rough sleeper. And we have a coordinator post both for the voluntary sector and for the City Council. So it's pleasing to see the level of investment that's continued around that. We are able to make an offer of support and accommodation to everybody who legally that we can, and that's a very positive position to be in. It doesn't mean that it's over by any means in terms of rough sleeping. It wasn't everybody in, and we can hang up our boots. People are flowing onto the streets still, and that's a challenge. We will see 70 to 90 people in any month, and up to 25 to 35 of those will be new to the streets. And so the team are very well occupied in terms of maintaining the numbers as low as we can. But it's a positive picture that we've had. So we'll be pleased to receive funds and be able to spend them.
Thank you. Any questions or comments, Suzanne?
I think I advise that we change the recommendation. We do know that we've got the money, perhaps, spending in accordance with the bid. Improve the solution.
Thank you. With that amendment then, if there's no further questions, can we agree recommendations 2.1 and 2.2? Okay, I mentioned earlier that I do have to leave at 10:02, so I'm going to now go back to item 7 and we'll take that. Suzanne?
I'm going to call that.
I'm just going to do the public bit first. So if we go back to item 7, which is the Grand Central Shopping Centre and car park litigation, residual cost liability and revised capital budget request. Now, the purpose of this report is to seek authority to defend a claim commenced by Grand Central Limited about alleged defects in the car park on the Grand Central Shopping Centre. The intention of the report is to repurpose the existing approved budget to the task of resolving these disputes. It's quite complicated the way this has come about, so I'll just run through the background. The redevelopment of the Palisade Shopping Centre and car park, which is now known, of course, as Grand Central, took place in 2011. And in 2011, BCC entered into an agreement for a lease with National Car Parks to construct a new car park and to grant NCP a new lease of that car park. The works were procured by National Rail under a development agreement. Completion of the works took place in June 15, following which it was alleged that the car park contained defects. As a consequence of these alleged defects, NCP refused to enter into the lease. In 2016, BCC sold its leasehold interest in Grand Central to Grand Central Limited. In this sale and purchase agreement, the council contracted to remedy the alleged defects in the car park. As National Rail had procured and carried out the works, the council also entered into a subsequent agreement with National Rail to rectify the identified alleged defects. The works were carried out by National Rail in 2016, and it's again alleged that these works failed to rectify the outstanding alleged defects. So in 2018, Grand Central Limited, National Car Parks and the Council entered into a settlement agreement by which a remedial solution would be implemented and various financial payments would be made. However, Grand Central Limited and NCP terminated the settlement agreements at the end of April 2020. And since then, Grand Central Limited has issued legal proceedings with a claim of around £20 million. The council has filed a defence and a counterclaim. These were served on Grand Central Limited on the 1st of June this year, and a claim has also been issued against National Rail on the same date to seek an indemnity from any liabilities that are found to be owed by BCC to Grand Central Limited. It's all a bit disappointing that the agreement has fallen apart because, of course, the only people who may gain in this process will be lawyers. The council has been advised that it could incur substantial fees and charges if the matter proceeds all the way to court. So every opportunity will be taken to encourage all of the parties to resolve these matters through mediation. And the council will be looking to pass any potential liabilities to National Rail. So anybody comments on the public items here? Robert first.
Thank you. And I think those dates you just touched on there, Leader, are really quite important. So the work on this is in the public work finished 2015. It was sold on by the council with an agreement in 2016 to fix any outstanding issues. In 2018, further settlement was made after further claims taken against the council. And now, as it says in 3.5, there's an accusation that the council failed to procure a solution and therefore they terminated the agreement with the council in April 2020. And when you go further down to 3.7, it says the council was required to file and serve a defence on the 26th of March 2021. The external legal team obtained extensions to that and finally filed a defence and counterclaim on the 1st of June 2020. The first question this raises with me is why has this not come back to Cabinet earlier? The last Cabinet report on this, I believe, is from September 2018. things have substantially changed, not just once, but multiple times since 2018. This clearly should have come back to Cabinet for guidance before we got to this situation. And so I think there's a real concern there about the time it's taken to come back, which raises another question. And without going into figures, so figures are in private, this question could be answered in public. What percentage of the figures related to on the private, which the Cabinet has been asked to approve today, is to cover spend that has already taken place before the Cabinet was updated on this? I have a number of other questions, but without moving this, ask them in private.
Okay,
Thanks very much, Ian. As has been made clear, and Councillor Alden said, Grand Central Limited Partnership have made a claim against us to remedy defects as part of the sale contract in 2016. And I was sort of quite noticed the juxtaposition here, because in 20th April Cabinet meeting, the refurbishment and conversion of the former youth court, we didn't put any such claims or defects in the sale contract, etc. there. So here we have a situation where we bought a building that found out had greater defects than we expected, I should say, sorry. And we are then had to come back to Cabinet to have more money to repair that, where here there seems to be that another party buying a building property from us has put things in a contract for us to be liable. So there may be something there for the future to try and protect the money. And again, I think as Councillor Alden said, it's worth pointing out that time and time again, we've mentioned about the procurement at times doesn't always seem to move in a timely manner. We suspect quite often that's why we're left with single contract negotiations. And again, here in 3.5, it says allegedly that Birmingham City Council failed to procure the remedial solution that was agreed and implement it in a timely way. And is this again? We don't know. I mean, obviously there's the allegedly here, but there does seem to be a pattern falling through here that possibly there is procurement sometimes slightly behind the curve. Thanks very much.
okay, I'm going to bring the officer into answer these questions. You just pick up one or two things first. I understand you, it's not your job to be fair, but I think, in fairness, this is a complicated situation. It involves a number of players trying to, all working to try to resolve a situation not everybody necessarily agrees is the same problem. So that's why this has taken so long and has ended. Well, it didn't need to end where it's now ended, but we are where we are because Central Limited have filed a claim. I don't accept there is a need for Cabinet reports to give further guidance. We have Cabinet reports by and large when decisions are required. And we will get an answer on the question of the percentage of the figures that have been spent to date. So I'll pass on to the officer at that point.
Okay, for me, I'm just trying to work out which question you were asking. I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
It's Councillor Robert.
Councillor Robert Alden. Councillor, the delay going back to Cabinet. For me, these agreements were terminated last April, and since then, Hammerson and undergone Grand Central Limited have been in very difficult times financially, and as you'll see by the share price going from 362 to maybe 20 pence. And so their focus was no longer on this matter. So if you look at the spend from April 2020 until the claim was issued a couple of months ago, it was minimal. So we would have been acting correctly up until the agreements were terminated. And since then, virtually nothing's happened. There has been no spend. Now the counterclaims come in, we're coming back to Cabinet. So I don't see where we've gone wrong.
If I can help, it was the query that we've actually issued a defence.
Yeah.
Before coming back to Cabinet.
Right. Okay.
Presumably cost us money.
Yes.
How much of the money that's being asked to now be approved has been spent already?
Right. Okay. I don't know the exact numbers on that. Okay.
We'll have to get you a note on that, but clearly these cases that the lawyers do have delegated authority to act in certain instances. I'm assuming that's what's happened here.
I think just to answer, especially as soon as we knew that further work was going to be done, the counterclaim was going to be done, we did move to bring this to cabinet straight away. And of course, the time it takes to get to cabinet can be several months. So I think as soon as Michael Davis was brought to my attention, we moved to bring to cabinet. So I'm sorry if it wasn't done at the appropriate speed.
Okay, there are some questions that we want to raise on the private agenda. So can I ask that the live feed is paused? Okay, so we've had a discussion on the exempt benefits privately, and now back into the public meeting, and we just need to agree the recommendations on this report 21424. Is that agreed? Thank you. I now have to leave, unfortunately, so I shall leave the final two items for Bridget to share. Thank you all very much.
Look forward to seeing you in the picture. Maybe with
Right, okay, everyone. Next up, we have Birmingham, item 14, Birmingham City Council performance and progress against delivery plan water report. So this is the support report outcome. It contains our vital signs, but also for the first time our state of the city indicators, which look at measures outside the council's direct control.
Sorry, this is me. Sorry, having a meeting.
I'm really sorry. Have we not completed this agenda item?
Yes, I want to try to go, yeah, that's right. We'll be completely Grand Central now, we have to go, can't I?
Yeah, you can. Sorry. Yeah. Thank you ever so much for your
It's all right.
suggestions. You were brilliant. Okay, have I missed anything else? No? We all good? Okay, let's go back to the performance report. So, this contains our vital signs. For the first time, it's got our state of the city indicators, which look at measures outside of the council's direct control. COVID obviously is affecting quite a number of the measures, either because they're not measured at all because of COVID, or because they've been hugely impacted by services being diverted because of COVID or other COVID-related things. The main report gives you some of the highlight achievements outside of the numbers, which I'm sure cabinet members will want to talk about of their own portfolios. In my own area, I'm just going to highlight the ongoing work of Reps and Bens, who have pretty much had to invent entire new systems over the last year, completely rewire what they do to get money out to individuals and businesses over the last year. And that's on top of doing their day job of collecting things in, which they continue to do despite all that disruption with meeting most of their targets, which I think is terrific. Also to flag up IT and customer support teams who similarly had to keep business going as normal with huge increased workload. What's reflected in this report is the efforts of our staff over the last year. They've been extraordinary over the last 15 months, whether it's picking up bins whilst others were at home, whether it's delivering food to people, whether it's going out and looking after disabled and elderly people, whether it's visiting vulnerable children, or whether it's people at Commonwealth Games teams keeping things on track despite the storm raging around them, and finance, as we heard earlier, rebalancing books and putting us up to a 3-star rating. So I just wanted to record our ongoing thanks to all the staff whose hard work it is that sits behind the stats and things that we have here today. Also to highlight ongoing efforts to address areas of underperformance. So we heard earlier in the meeting about work to improve send. We've heard earlier about work to tackle fly tipping and waste. And of course, we have the modernisation programme that continues to carry on in the background of this. That's not looking at incremental change to what we do on performance, that's looking at wholesale rewiring some of the things that we do as a council to really drive proper improvements for people that rely on our services. And that continues to run, and we should see some of the first reports out of that coming to the next cabinet meeting, hopefully. I'm looking to cabinet members to see if there's anything in particular they want to highlight from their portfolios before I turn to questions. Jane, over to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to give on health-wise something. I think everybody will be aware that children and young people have been massively impacted by COVID in the past 12 months. Obviously, as far as the portfolio is concerned, that's had a slight impact in terms of delivery against performance. But I think we're in a good place now to move forward and to address some of those things. I particularly wanted to draw parents' attention to the Jobs and Skills Task Force that we're working on at the moment across different departments. And in particular, the effort we put into reduce the number of leaks in leak coverage. There have been some concerns over the summer. I do think that's a case now to address that on the basis of the knowledge of what we're going to do over the next few months. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Anyone else like to answer questions? Tristan, over to you.
Go on then, as you want to be. I was just going to, there's a couple, and I think I may have referenced them before, but I think they're probably worth just noting. Is one around the increased engagement with staff with things like Yammer. I think we see a significant increase continues to grow, and I think that's really welcome and really positive for our staff to get engagement across the organisation, especially in these times of remote working when they're not perhaps having a daily interaction with colleagues as they want to have done. And the other one I just went back was the level of sickness, which, and I know it is quite evident that the move to home working prompted a distinct and noticeable drop in the amount of sickness absence. The question is whether we can maintain that as members of staff return to work. And I think there is still some work to do there in terms of understanding what needs to be done to keep that level of sickness down. But I do think it is significant for us as an organisation when we have traditionally had say high levels of sickness. We've had levels of sickness comparable with the sector, but that is reasonably high. And we are doing our best to reduce that, but I think there are certainly some lessons learned in terms of what flexible working and home working means for us in terms of sickness absence.
Anyone else would like to answer questions? No? Okay, let's go 1, 2, 3 then. You go first.
Thank you very much, Bridget. I was going to mention the children's wellbeing portfolio. I think it sort of stood out for me a bit. There's been a lot of discussion around it, shall we say, within the council and full council, etc. But I didn't get a tape measure out and measure them. But this seems to be the shortest report of them all. I think that the way I was looking at it, seemed less than the sheet of A4, which I took as surprising, because Bridget says, we're looking for vital signs of what's going on in the various portfolios here. I noticed there was no mention of home to school transport, which I found quite amazing, really. We have a child that's uncommunicative, was dropped off at the wrong school. No one is picking up the emergency helpline so that the school can find where that child should be. And it's not here in any form of portfolio commentary whatsoever, which made me wondering sort of how selective is this about what is being looked, because this is meant to be a report to drive improvements. So, I look a bit deeper forward. In paragraph 5.34, I noticed talks of the attainment gap of Birmingham SEND children and say narrowed slightly for SEND children. But then when you dig a bit deeper, it's saying that the attainment gap actually grew for children with education, healthcare plans, referred of course to EDHCPs. And it's a bit concerning that we've got a problem here that we seem to be having children with EHCPs that, they should be getting the most support, and yet there seems to be a gap opening there. Paragraph 4.41 talks about a marginal improvement in the final month of EHCP timescales, but the data itself shows a quarter four outturn of 37% against a target of 90%. Now, these 20-week timescales are legal duty, but this here isn't really being highlighted in the report either. We're looking at vital signs here, and it's not even there. In the written questions that we've submitted, that we've had answers to, less than half of the EHCP annual reports submitted have had decisions made against them, and less than 2%, that's less than 2% have been done in the statutory timescale. Again, not in the report. Just sort of highlighting this because we're saying this is meant to be to drive improvement, where, less than a sheet of A4 saying how everyone's done a fabulous job. 28% of all decisions due were actually made. Again, this is mandatory stuff. It needs to be carried out. As of the last full council date, only 42% of VHPs for post-16 transition had been issued. That leaves nearly 1,000 16-year-old disabled children in the city without a care plan. You know, again, it's not in this report. And you know, I only just decided to dig down into this because it looks so short. When I looked at it, I haven't had the time to look at any of the other portfolios as deeply as I looked at this one. And I've noticed some really glaring omissions here. And I just think that if these reports are going to have some level of ability to drive forward, you know, you need to be able to put in the warts and all stuff, you know, rather than just saying, I think we've done a great job. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I would say that all of these indicators, if you scrutiny, they've been through a number of cabinets, they're not new ones, they've been around for 4 quarters now. I'm pretty sure the piece that you referred to happened several quarters ago, which we might not refer to in this report. We'll come back to the other issues you raised after taking questions for everyone. Robert, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. It is, of course, covering the years, because of not the outturns. Got a lot of figures, obviously, referenced back to previous ones. Just picking up on DL 09, so in your it's talked about online transactions in comparison to telephone calls. We talked about there's a problem now extracting the data anymore. It just says it's reached its technical capacity. I doesn't really give much detail as to what the actual issue is there. So if you have some information about what the actual issue is around to why that's no longer able to be extracted compared to how it could previously. I think it would also be useful to just get an answer around what we can expect in Q1. And what I mean by that is, obviously at this point, we've still got a lot in here which are referencing COVID and data can't currently be provided. Now, my understanding is the council is looking to ensure that in Q1 we'll be back to normal and all indicators will be reported. It would just be useful to get that confirmed in the meeting, I think, because clearly the council is looking to migrate over to a large proportion of staff working from home over the next few years, and so this data does need to be able to be done, even if the staff aren't in the building. So these reports need to be produced. Which brings us on to the next report. I think a lot of work has gone in to get this report over the last couple of years into the state it is, and that's very good and well, and well done to the staff involved. The key now is it's not just about reporting; it's actually now going to be used to drive improvement, and so residents see the benefits of this data rather than it just being something that is brought to cabinet and not actually seeing the driving out of some of the issues that are in here. I won't touch on ones that have already been touched on by Councillor Mankey, that have been very elegantly put to cabinet. The concerns are there. I want to pick up on actually a couple of the new ones. There are some new ones in here that are due to come in next year. In the report. TE08 is one of them, and it talks about it's a target on council control of parking in the city centre. I'll totally understand why it's not got a result against it yet. It's not starting being measured until the first quarter, but we are in the first quarter now. So I had hoped the target the council was aiming to achieve would actually be available in that. So perhaps either the cabinet member can give that target now, or we can have that target circulated to members afterwards. Then turning to some of the portfolio-specific ones, this is what we've got the data for, SSP05. Now, this is around completing all of the tree surveys within the required time limit to be checked every 5 years. The report has no data against it, saying it's because it's in year 5 of the report. Slightly confusing, because surely, given it's a cumulative total over 5 years, if they're all being done, the answer would be 100%, not no figure. Because they had indeed all been done. So can you just confirm actually have those actually been done as meant to be? And then the final one is SSP03, which is around missed collections. And of course, we can see here it's gone from 100 to 125 in the latest quarter. So that's a 25% increase in the number of missed collections in the city in the last quarter. Clearly, that's something the council needs to get grips with in the coming year.
Thank you. John.
Thank you. We actually have quite a substantial report here. It's up quite low on the cabinet agenda. I think it's disappointing because you've given us not just the target performance, but also narrative accounts of the work of every cabinet member over the last year. And I mentioned deputy that some of this has gone to scrutiny. I wondered how far this has been circulated so that all councillors can have a look at it and hold you folks on cabinet accountable for your work. I would suggest that there's enough information here that should actually go to full council to have a look at it and use it as a basis for questions. Leader, this is going on. I know for other occasions some questions which struck me to ask him, but one or two things I will concentrate on. And I will focus on Councillor Daffy, as he is here. First of all, he refers to low traffic neighbourhood trial schemes, and he says that the proposal is that they should be embedded subject to public consultation, which is good because there was no public consultation when they were implemented, and in some areas it's caused a lot of stress and upset. And I know that was directed both by government and by the council. But however, given the record of the department and public consultation on controversial schemes, what will be the weight of that consultation? Will there be consideration to abandon schemes which attract overwhelming hostility from the public? And I don't say that negatively, because I think there are opportunities possibly to do schemes elsewhere where people may want them, because these were put in centrally. Nobody was consulted around the city in terms of who wanted schemes and who didn't. And maybe that if you put a broader question out who would like schemes and projects of this kind, people would volunteer and come forward to say, "Oh, they desperately need them." But given the record of Transport Department on public consultation, and the cabinet members own statement that the consultation is not a referendum, what assurances will you give to people taking part in the public consultations that they will be listened to? And that brings me on to something that both the leader and the cabinet mentioned in their reports, and that's very about flyover. They both mentioned it as a milestone. Well, it's in your reports, so I'm going to raise it. Because if you are anywhere within range of very far, you will see the impact of that work on your life and on the transport network. And the cabinet member refers to it as a critical milestone. So perhaps you tell us why it was critical. Because, well, I'm just coming to that. Because people using the non-flyover route are not finding that the joining up and the joining up of Perry Bar that was promised. They're just finding themselves still riding through concrete walls and railings, and in fact, the absence of greenery that used to be there, and the flyover they're all been stripped out, trees, etc. But then there is this second statement that this is key to delivering significant transport improvements in the area. What has happened? Number 11 bus, the city's historic, famous circular bus route, actually serves a purpose as well. That's why it was there. Is no longer a circular bus route. It's been dismantled by National Express West Midlands, and if you want to travel through Perry Bar on the number 11 bus, it's not a case of getting out of your car. You have to get out of the bus to find your way around Perry Bar through, because they can no longer operate it when their buses are facing one-hour delays. And I know that's not just a flyover demolition, it's also the much drawn out work on the Birchfield roundabout, which I suspect could have been done a lot quicker. Had that demolition's easy, isn't it? Demolish a flyover in 2 weekends. But the construction of the Birchfield roundabout work has taken a year and is still nowhere near completion. Nowhere near. Even if you drop in the topping in July, as you said in your written answer, council, there will still be months and months of work during which traffic is not flowing through Perry Bar. Will the number 11 bus ever be installed? I don't know, but we're already seeing the impact on the public transport network, and we'll consider the work. And was a critical milestone critical in doing damage to the transport network, or critical in some other way that we're yet to understand?
Okay, thank you. I'll pick up a couple of bits in my portfolio and go to others. So, question on DL09. I understand the lack of data is due to the new telephony system to change the way that we collect things. I will get an get clarification for you on that, that would be helpful. Will we be back to normal in Q1, as out of January? We very much hope to be operating. When I say back to normal, I mean the council, in fairness, has kept the vast majority of services running over the last year. The vast majority of staff either working from home, working differently in the field. There are some exceptions to that. We hope to bring them back online when legalities and science allows, and keep those under review. We're happy to be talking about that. And then in terms of driving improvement in these areas, the modernisation programme, as I mentioned, is very much geared towards getting away from incremental improvements in this and taking around the edges towards wholesale change in areas of council, which I think we'll start to see the fruits of that work coming through in the public domain shortly. Otherwise, I'm going to turn to the cabinet members to come back. Who wants to go first? Thank you very much for your questions and the reserve of that. Last week, I did send out a briefing one, which I hope will be part of a regular one, where we actually list the positive changes that we're making to our SEND services as we continue our improvement journey, so we can improve the outcomes for children. Mentioned in that, one of the first factors in there was changes we're making around special educational needs assessment and review around the SEND team. We're working very hard with them to ensure that service comes fit service, and they're the people who deal with the assessments of need in the HCP journey that our families, children, and people go through to ensure it's more effective and more efficiently issued and reviewed, and also to clear the backlog, which we are aware that we do have. So we're holding a number of meetings with our mainstream and special schools that we can work and co-design with our parent care forum to discuss and support children and young people as they move through, particularly those in their mainstream placements. The SENAR restructure of that department is paused at the moment while we do some co-production with families, children, young people and schools, and then we'll be setting forward on that journey to make that a better journey. They're really important changes, they're much needed changes, and we do recognise we've got some way to go to meet the standards which are required. As far as the travel assist goes, we've made a significant investment over the past 9 months to improve homeschool transport service. We now have some very highly experienced professionals we can see, people who are experts in their field, and we're pleased to say that currently our transport is looking at above 99% of all of its routes on time, and we will build on this improvement. The leader has had task and finish route, which has been operating, and we're going to our final board meeting on the 21st of June, where we're reporting back on that. There have been significant improvements through that, through the procurement of homeschool travel and the homeschool journey. I think the complaints about service have fallen. One of the biggest complaints was about phone calls. They are now well within our recognised limits. So thank you very much. Thank you. Christine, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure, thank you. With respect to Councillor Alden's question, T48, I will come back to you and the colleagues in the cabinet, ensure that's circulated as soon as possible. Councillor Hunt made a number of points. I'll start with the low traffic neighbourhood. Back last summer, we were asked by government to bring forward some plans to deliver transform the active health fund and deliver that with those works within 8 weeks, restricting the length of the consultation that we could have. By and large, most of the schemes that we delivered through the first tranche of the active health fund were very, very successful. There were some issues. We were very quickly to address some of those issues. With respect to the low traffic neighbourhood, the one in LaSalle and my ward, the measures that we brought in have been incredibly welcomed both by residents, but particularly by school communities, where 2 of the measures relate to improving road safety outside 2 particular schools. Matters that the schools have done for many years. So they really welcome those low traffic neighbourhood measures. In King's Heath, there have been some challenges, largely caused by some utilities work. Now that the utility works have concluded, I think we can safely say that things have massively improved on those roads outside the low traffic neighbourhood, namely Vicarage Road and Avenue Road. In fact, yesterday I saw a tweet. Somebody took a picture at 5 p.m. yesterday on Vicarage Road, and I couldn't see any traffic there whatsoever. So things are improving, but we're not going to rest on our laurels. There's an executive board that's been set up for the King's Eve LGN that has member involvement of those members directly impacted by this project, and we're looking to bring it forward a series of other interventions to ensure that we can embed that in. We've always been open and transparent with our residents. Where we have to make changes, we will do so. These are temporary measures, so if it means that we have to withdraw scheme because it's not successful and does not have the support of the community or has a hindering impact on the quality of the residents, we will do so. I don't think we're in that place with King's Eve, but if we do get to that place, we will take the necessary action. With respect to Perry Bar, we have a very, very important month in terms of the highway project. We have always said right from the outset, the most difficult bit of delivering the highways project in Perry Bar was going to be the bit around that. But we are on time and we are on budget, despite the challenges that COVID has created for the highway scheme. Towards the middle of July, we will be capping the item and carrying out some very, very important work, and there will be an impact at that particular time. I noticed yesterday that the Conservatives issued a statement on the yellow bus. We are in the process of issuing a rebuttal on that. It's very interesting that the Conservatives very quickly changed their statement. There were deleted tweets and all sorts, which we did notice, and we do have some big screens of that. What I will say is that the statement that was made, the initial statement that was made, was far from the truth, because the issues in King's Eve, as I've said, are not impacting on the level route as they were previously. That's improved massively. I've been in regular communications with National Express. And furthermore, I think to say that the highway scheme on its own has impacted on Perry Bar is again disingenuous. There are two other projects in which the delivery is being led by a Conservative mayor, one being the bus rapid transit system and the other being the train station. And I yesterday been challenging officers from Transport West Midlands to look at the lane closure outside the train station, how that's impacting the traffic. So the cocktail of projects is impacting on traffic movements through there. And I think it's really important that whilst we're happy to be held to account as the council for the projects we're delivering, the Conservative mayor is also held to account for the projects. I hope Councillor Hunt and the Liberal Democrats in Perry Bar remain consistent on the position they've always taken for this. Their position has always been they've opposed projects which will increase and support bus reliability through Perry Bar. They've opposed projects that will create segregated cycling lanes through Perry Bar. They've opposed projects that will introduce the bus rapid transit. And I hope when these projects have been delivered and the people of Perry Bar and North Birmingham see the wider benefits of these created, that they will still put out leaflets saying they oppose these, because we will certainly be putting out leaflets to say that we took these tough decisions. We absolutely made it clear right from the start that there will be some challenging times for the community through the north of the city, while in the short term, but these projects will bring about massive benefits in the delivery of a train station, the delivery of a new bus station, the improvements that we'll see for traffic flow in and out of one stop, both for private car and for public transport. So I will stop there, but I hope the Liberal Democrats will remain consistent. We do have a habit of changing positions, but I hope on this that they'll remain consistent and say that they've always opposed these very, very important changes that people in the north of the city will benefit from for decades to come.
Thank you, Sue. John, do you want to come back on any of those points?
If you let me highlight, because obviously that's what government and it's untrue, is last government last one, it's basically untrue. We have proposed schemes that have done bad, not proposed improvements in public transport, we've not proposed improvements for cyclists. We proposed schemes that have done badly in that field considered, which is the demolition of the flyover in particular is a very, very good example of, and is not going to deliver improvements for traffic flow. So the cabinet member is simply wrong. And if you'd like to use editing to this response, you'd be very welcome to, because you won't find this.
Yeah, thank you. And I no doubt the cabinet member might wish to withdraw the comments he just made about claims about things we've said, because I'll quite happily read to him the briefing note that was given to the Transport Delivery Committee and to the Combined Authority. It says the reliability of Service 11 has significantly deteriorated in recent months due to the long-term roadworks in Peribar and the introduction of a low-traffic neighbourhood in Kingsley. In the afternoon, peak delays regularly extend to an hour at Peribar, while peak hour delays in excess of 20 minutes are common in Kingsley. National Express have reported it has become almost impossible to maintain reliability and to provide an acceptable level of service. National Express and the Transport Authority very clearly say it's the Kingsley low-traffic neighbourhood. Plainly relying by saying that is simply not to have understood what the problems are in this city.
If I can respond to one point, that we have always said that a removal of the flyover and the wider highways project will carry on will improve bus reliability. I think Councillor Hunt and his colleagues are absolutely right. They've taken every opportunity to oppose the A34 highway project. So I'm not. I think that's fair. Evidence in terms of providing evidence. I think there's many reasons to raise these issues. Councillor Alder, if that was the case, so we have challenged Transport Authority, which is on 30 minutes, for that statement that they issued. We did challenge them on that, but we made it very, very clear. We do not accept what they say, particularly around Kingsley and furthermore around Peribar. Why did you then delete the tweet? Why did you change the tweet?
Because you have screenshots of both of them, and you'll know that simply what we did was one was unreadable because there was too much text on the graphic, and therefore that was removed. You know that because you've got
Okay, I'm going to move this on.
the leader who signed with the Transport Cabinet member.
The context of the tweet was deleted, not the graphic that you designed. The tweet was deleted and changed where you clearly removed the
Gentlemen, we are not going to settle this here. I'm going to move this on. I'm going to move this on. Okay. I'm not entirely sure that's what happened, but thank you for your comments. I think we're seeing this responded very comprehensively. John, would you like to come in?
Thank you, Deputy. Yes. Councillor, he was back over all the tree surveys. I believe they are carried on a 4-year cycle. I will check and get back to you on that. But any of them carried out this year, which is why they don't agree with this year's stats. They'll restart next year on the cycle. I will confirm that. With regards to collections and the rate of miscollections, yes, there's also a new target for us. We've number of 100 miscollections, 100,000 out of the air. That's largely what other authorities work towards. We're certainly well aware that we have issues with Birmingham to resolve, and we've had a number of issues with miscollections because we've had crews have to go on isolation and go back for the agency and street cleaning staff. So it's actual work in progress, but it is a key focus of the service.
Thank you. Any other cabinet members wanting to add anything? No, I think that is all the key points covered briefly.
Yeah, Griffith, I was just going to come back on the answers there that Councillor Booth gave in response to the questions I asked, and I think that this is supposed to be a report that shows the driver and what's going on and how things can work forward. The shortest report, I asked some questions, and the answers there we can fill the sheet of A4, and I think that if these reports are going to have anything worthwhile in them, they have to be an honest representation of it. And I'm sure every other cabinet member would say, of course, that theirs is, but I only dug into them and I found all that. And there's a load of information that Kate gave that should have been in the report. And why wasn't it there? And so everyone else is studiously looking at their laptops, so I don't blame them, because at the end of the day, if someone else was to go digging through some of those reports, would they find the same thing? I don't know. I'm sure they'd send it. There's reports before, but I think probably these reports are going to go forward and have what they need to be representative of what's going on in the department. I would suggest that Councillor Booth.
I think Councillor Booth's defence, it's fair to say we have had some issues with personnel turnover in that area, and some of the information being submitted on time. That is not a failure, and that is something I'll be picking up with them going forward. Robert.
Thank you. It's just on the first one I raised, the second one, which I was hoping would be a really simple answer, that we would there is now a policy that we will get full Q1 data reported when the Q1 data report comes forward. Instead, I think, I heard you definitely that part of your answer was it would depend what Sajid Javid has to say about whether we return to normal or not. He, of course, not that it has anything to do with the quarter management, the council has been in place for 4 days this quarter. There is 1 day of quarter one left. You've been deputy leader for the entire quarter. Perhaps we could just get a simple answer: is the policy that we are going to bring forward the full data for the next report or not?
I think I have misunderstood you actually in your question. Yeah, I thought you were referring to the council getting back to normal as a whole. No, we will endeavour to bring it forward as we stated.
Thank you.
Right, we've run out of questions, we've run out of answers, I think. So let's always want to close. So we've got recommendation 2.1, which is to note the contents of the report is agreed. Thank you. That takes us on to plan procurement activities. Tristan.
Nothing to add other than this is the standard plan procurement, and I look forward to the no doubt gripping intervention that we're about to be subjected to by the Conservatives opposite. I would just say the purpose of this report, and I know I said this last time, the purpose of this report is that if there are any reasons why a report should be submitted for a full cabinet report, and it is up to the opposition to convince cabinet that there is a good reason why a report should be referred back to cabinet as opposed to being done on officer delegations under which this report is produced.
Okay, thank you. Robert, give us a gripping intervention.
Thank you. I have 3 ones to raise. The first one, touched on the last holiday activity and food, just to say very much support that. But just a flag, there isn't a planned decision date against that yet. And given the description, it sounds like that's needed for summer holidays. So just to urge that doesn't need to be actioned ASAP, so we don't get to the holidays and it not being in place. Then the other 2, the first one is on the very top one, the report, the Vulnerable Adult Support Framework Agreement. I'd ask this one actually does come back for a full report because it deals within it the provision of housing for ex-offenders. Now, I think the residents and communities in the city want to understand how that process is being followed in the city. So therefore, the public report for that would be, I think, a sensible thing. And then the third one was just comment really, rather than asking for you to bring it back. It's just to note the housing stock conditions survey. Very much welcome the fact you're doing it, but flag that this is now 10 years since the last one, and it is meant to be updated regularly. So would ask that when this one's done, perhaps a more regular update than 10 years done, because it is very relevant for many of the things the council might to bid for, or for being able to exercise some of its powers to have that information that is important.
Okay, you?
Yeah, I can't say it gripping, but it's just a genuine request for information, really. The egress contract, SCN, but on the old, but I just noticed that we seem to be halfway through that contract and it's looking to be extended. Is that because more work was needed than was initially thought in the report to cabinet, or is it going more slowly? I'm just intrigued as to what the reason behind extending the duration of the contract is. We're just about halfway through.
Okay, Tristan, do you want to come back on any of those?
Yeah, well, the first, just on the food project over the summer, yes, he is right. I think the issue with that one is just that it's been very short notice, and to turn it around in time has been really challenging. I think we're pretty confident we will get there in some holidays, but it is like literally happening on changing on a daily basis. So it is pretty tight time-wise. In terms of the housing stock update, I think I'll probably just have to refer that on to the leader. I think the portfolio it resides in. I can see much of your point, but as all of these things, it probably comes down to resources. In terms of the first report around the housing impact, I think if I can, because I think if we did it on that basis, there'll be some impact on some parts of the city, then obviously almost all the reports would have to be brought back to the full cabinet. I take your point about it being a sensitive matter, but I will seek advice from the legal officer if I can, Suzanne, just on that question raised by Councillor Alden on the first report. Okay, can I come back to you, Councillor? Yeah. And the egress SEM one, I think is exactly that, in that the Yeah, I think essentially it is exactly that. But as we move through the process of data migration, more the needs have increased and changed, and therefore we need an increase and change in contract.
Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands. So recommendation 2.1 is recommendation 2.1 that report agreed. Lovely. I'm not notified of any other urgent business. So I think that brings the meeting to an end. Thank you very much, everyone.
Oh, don't give me that. You're just hedging my bets.
Judging how I'm yeah, I'll take 1-0 before a game. We only get one chance.
I was waiting for you to say you were 20. I thought it was over 30.
Enjoy.
Yeah, exactly.